Warm welcome to this yeah, I don't know how many installments we had already in this series. Quite a lot, even before I joined Xillio as a company, I think.
Yeah, welcome to the Modernize and Migrate webinar series brought to you by Xillio. I think that was the official introduction before you joined, Rob.
Very good.
My name is Alistair Pugin, and I'll be assisting Rob in delivering this session around navigating through content services from Microsoft and also the Xillio migration platform. In today's webinar, we want to talk to everyone about the myths that most organizations experience when wanting to move off their legacy enterprise content management system, and also looking at how to accelerate your digital workplace strategy going forward when adopting a cloud-based application services around that. If you can't hear us, please use the dial-in numbers that you should have received in the original meeting invite. We will be making this webinar available on demand for all attendees. Please also add your questions. I think there is a chat option for everyone that is in here. So please feel free to add your questions if you have any questions, and we'll definitely make a plan either throughout the webinar or at the end of the webinar to address your questions. Normally we say please share, like, and subscribe and hit the bell notification. This is not a YouTube channel, but it will be going to Xillio's YouTube channel. And so stick around today and listen to Rob and I chat as we debunk the myths and the misconceptions about legacy ECM and hybrid ECM systems, so that you can build a future-proof information management strategy and migrate legacy content into the Microsoft 365 platform with confidence. I think that was the introductions we used to use. Does that work for you, Rob?
It's fantastic. And indeed, and I only want to add that it has been a while since we addressed all these 5 myths in a row. I've been focusing a lot lately on the one aspect we're going to address today as well, is compliance. By popular demand, there's a lot of interest for that topic, and continues to be. But we thought, okay, let's also take a step back, use the thermometer, and see how actual this still is, because we get a lot of questions about it still in our daily practices. So,
and there's new things, right? There's new things. Microsoft made a big announcement yesterday or this morning. I saw it in my feed this morning, and we're going to talk. There's actually a slide that talks to the new compliance offering from Microsoft as well.
Check. Okay, with that, let's take it away. Maybe some more formal introduction. So, Alistair, you want to introduce yourself a bit better?
Well, and this is how long ago we actually did this session, right? That's an old slide from when I moved down to Cape Town, which is where that picture comes from. My name is Alistair Pugin. I'm the CTO at a consulting services business called NB Consult. We've got offices and I'm currently in Cape Town, South Africa. We've got offices across the globe. Cape Town, well, not across the globe, Cape Town, we've got offices in the UK and also offices in Hong Kong. And I've spent most of my life, well, from Tahoe to today, for those that have been around when SharePoint first released their first version of SharePoint, when Microsoft released their first version of SharePoint. But I come from an open text background. I'm still, and I begrudgingly say that I'm still certified in LiveLink. And I come from a knowledge management background, and I assist companies pretty much exactly where Xillio is. And it's a great fit because we're helping organizations consume enterprise content management services or content services in Microsoft 365.
Thanks. I'm Rob Aaldijk, based in the Netherlands. Yeah, my career, well, it's just 27 years. I have to update it, slightly over 28 years now in the information management domain. I've had positions at the likes of Accenture, Cognizant, Atos Origin, so big system integrators and advisory companies. Also with smaller software firms that dealt with content management products. Currently working for Xillio, which is a leading party, global party in content migrations. We do the global industries that have a lot of content and basically want to move from their legacy systems to more modern platforms. doing that on a daily basis. I have a bit of a double role with Xillio. I'm both the product manager, so I deal with the product portfolio and try to keep that relevant for the market. There's all these developments, obviously. And I double as a principal consultant because that's my background, and occasionally with selected customers, I do strategic advisory work. And also very much like to spar with all kinds of customers and partners on developments in the market, giving second opinions and all of that. It's a lot of fun for me still, even after these 28 years, and hopefully still a few years to come. Reach out to me or with Alistair if you have specific questions on very specific topics, but there's room indeed for questions at the end of this meeting. And also, as Alistair said, just use the chat if you want to address some pregnant question. So today we will be focusing on the 5 myths that we typically encounter when discussing digital transformations, content platform, renewal strategies. So any platform in the software industry has a life cycle, and there's an end of life to any product we have encountered in the past. And either you go for an upgrade if the vendor has one available for you, or you switch to another product altogether, or you build your own. It's basically the strategies that have been deployed in all these years. And it's fun to see all these trends and developments over the years, and there's always a what's new and what's exciting. So we definitely talk about that today as well. And we tend to take a specific focus. There has been a tremendous demand for information about the applicability of the Microsoft platform in this area. And we get a lot of questions around that. So we have been focusing the series on making that clear for people that are still investigating or had their first steps, or were almost forced in the COVID period to move to an online collaboration platform and then see all the consequences of that. So there's different angles that you can take on that. But this kind of summarizes what we encounter almost on a daily basis. So the 5 myths. The first one, and it's in a particular order, but there's no specific priority to any of these myths saying, hey, this is the real blocker for us. That can differ per situation, per organization. But this one we hear a lot. It's impossible to migrate away from a legacy system for XYZ reasons. So we'll dive into that a bit to see what still holds true there. We need a compliant solution. Compliance last few years became far more important than it has been in the previous decades for very different reasons. And if you took the trouble to configure or support compliance in your current platform and landscape, how are you going to replicate that in another one? Very valid question, obviously. Cloud is not secure. Well, for the last X years, we have been discussing transformations into the cloud of all kinds of workloads, as they're called, including the collaborative one. And the big 5 almost vendors, 3 to 5 vendors, have of course positioned themselves very well in that area, and now are trying to kind of close the gap, either offering all kinds of transformation services with or without partners, offering hybrid solutions if you really need to stick on a part of your workloads to be on-premise, and variants of that. But security is one of the main reasons, especially enterprises still say, okay, I want to keep my data as close to me as possible. What is actually allowing me to move to the cloud with especially the most sensitive data? So we can give a perspective on that. And finally, that's together with the security, Alistair is going to talk about this one as well. It's very difficult to build out a new information architecture. And sometimes the reason is plainly we created so much mess over the past 20 years. How are we ever going to solve that? Interesting question. Maybe deserves a separate webinar, but we'll see. Finally, it's going to cost, it's not a minor detail, it's actually one of the critical success factors. It's going to cost a lot of money and effort to train and adopt our user audience for any new platform we're considering. So at least you need to take that into account. But the question is it really costly? So we'll be talking about these 5 myths. And I'm starting with the first one. It's impossible to migrate from a legacy ECM system for various reasons. And if you look at those reasons, there are some issues, at least perceived issues, to considering the migration to a newer platform. And the first one is basically we have such a vendor lock-in with the current vendor. He or she makes it very difficult for it to move to any other platform for X reasons, like they come with a compelling offer to move that to their cloud solution. And of course, we know it will remain a vendor lock-in in that case, but the offer is compelling enough to consider that. And maybe because of the price attractiveness, we're not even considering lots of features or other aspects, security, compliance, that are still important. We hear that a lot.
So Rob, can I ask then, just on the vendor lock-in side, right? When I look at vendor lock-in, there's 2 sort of things that pop into my head. One, is there an API into the legacy ECM system, right? So I would ask that, is there an SDK and API? And then the second one is these vendors, these legacy ECM platform vendors, are they providing a cloud service that is a consumptive model, or is it bring your own license and we give you infrastructure in one of the corresponding cloud providers like AWS or GCP? You know, those are the 2 things that you mentioned, right? One, from a vendor lock-in, are they offering you a comparative service like you would have a PaaS service? And then 2, is there APIs available to you so that you can get your data out? When we
I think there's even more to it, and we'll come to that. But don't forget that the vendor lock-in is also about when we move to another platform, are we really moving to a new vendor lock-in? And that's an important question to ask yourself. So if I move to another platform, is it more open? Is it more, does it indeed offer better integration possibilities, etc.? Does it give me more degrees of freedom, basically, to secure my roadmap in the near, but preferably also midterm or even long-term future? And that also deals with the fact that really a lot of consumers have existing customizations and integrations with the rest of their landscape. So it's not all about content, a lot, of course, but primary business process applications that make use of content, especially those customers that tried to come to an enterprise content management landscape where one repository serves them all. I don't know any customer basically that achieved that in full, but there are some that did some serious tries there and integrated a lot of these applications with the legacy content platform. So is that not that complex, such a complexity that it has become almost impossible to move that construct to a new situation? But then you should ask yourself, if you relook at the architecture of that, does it still make sense? And there are so many new solutions to all problems you would never consider because you never had the opportunity to in your old landscape, but now you have. And maybe with a good support of a good architect, you can actually manage to simplify your landscape, drive the cost down a lot, increase the performance, get the compliance on top of that, and a lot more. So vendor lock-in is one aspect. At the same time, there's opportunity, and that always should result in a business case, obviously, balancing the pros and cons. And finally, and very often mentioned, is we have such a rich platform. Currently, there's such a lot of features. We couldn't find any platform that has the same or nearly the same as we did. And I always ask, so how many of these features are actually being used? And the answer, maybe the max is 40%. Then you can ask, are you not paying too much already for your current platform? It has been expanding over the years because ECM vendors try to cover all the use cases they could find just to keep their customer base. But hardly anyone makes use of all. So that one, I think, is debunked already. if you look at the actual requirements or you build them up from the ground, you actually will see that a more generic platform in most cases suits those needs, and there are always options to extend that. Quickly look at the chat. Yeah, it's waiting in the lobby. We let everybody in so far, I think, as far as I can see. So welcome for the people that dialed in a bit later. We're now discussing for them the first myth, which is about, is it really possible to migrate out of my current legacy environment at all? So if you turn it around, if you're looking at that target platform, and what's the considerations? And here we touch upon a few of the things that Alistair already mentioned. But I would start with, are we looking now at a point solution, so more niche oriented to my particular business or even parts of business, certain business processes that I want to support with that, which are very critical to me, or maybe the rest of it, because those were already covered by bespoke solutions. Or can I go, or should I go for a mainstream solution? And I think it's almost impossible if you do not daily deal with this kind of topic that you get some expert knowledge to help you out with that dilemma, because doing a proper platform selection is very important to meet your goals and requirements. And you need people that do this on a daily basis, whether it be domain analysts like the gardeners and foresters of this world, or niche experts, self-supporting, that only do this and have content management expert in their resume. Do get the external help, because otherwise it will be a nightmare and a jungle of solutions and vendors and promises that you cannot really judge for what they are. One of the important criteria, like Alistair said, is modern integration possibilities. APIs are mentioned. So we're done with the old web services already. We're done with the batch integrations. Preferably, we have a REST API we can talk to over the internet, secure internet, obviously, but still, and make sure that every application can talk with everything, and also the base services that are offered by the platform are accessible. And there are a lot of differences between the platforms in this particular aspect. So it's important to understand what is important, what you need there, and what you need to integrate. If you want to integrate your SAP or other ERP or CRM platform, Salesforce, ServiceNow, whatever, Workday for HR with your content management system, make sure that maybe even the vendor itself says, I have a preference there, or at least offers you to integrate in a rather achievable way. And the other one, cloud or still on-prem, and there's also hybrid, of course. So it's important that the vendor itself, the platform vendor, has a vision on when to go for cloud, when to go for on-prem, or even go for the hybrid alternative or compromise, whatever you want to call it. And there's key decision factors for that. Actually, we will not dwell on those in this session per se. It's too much detail. But you don't have to per se move everything into the cloud. Sometimes it's less convenient from any perspective, including cost, to do that. And it makes a lot of sense to stay on-prem, or at least combine some sources in a hybrid fashion. Fourth, completeness of vision and features. Make sure you read all the latest analyst reports that deal with the domain. You will see noted differences between the two, especially in this domain. If I currently look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant and the Forrester Wave reports, there are marked differences for this area, particularly because the definition of what belongs to the platform is different in their minds. And it's important to understand those differences and make sure the definition matches what you're looking for. And finally, but should be on number one, maybe the user experience. Not all platforms are the same, and it certainly goes for user experience. Actually, if you look at the current rat race between the big cloud platforms, this is the prime competitive area next to compliance. Compliance is also very important, but the user experience, especially driven by the fact that, of course, in COVID times, everyone needed to go digital. And if the platform was not making you productive on a massive scale, obviously it did not fit the purpose. So we have winners and losers there already. And there's still niches. There's still difference between kind of open source availability of such platforms and paid ones, cloud or not cloud, etc. But there are definitely some winners in this area, and you can see that in the analyst reports. So check that out. If you ask us, as the people that deal with this on a daily basis, is it possible to migrate legacy ECM? Well, speaking for Xillio, we've done that now for over 250 customers in 18 years' time. Big names there, so meaning also sometimes very complex scopes. We covered virtually all use cases so far, ranging from just plain document management to online content management, e-commerce driven, service perspectives like migrating all the dossiers out of Salesforce, etc., for support application, compliance situations for pharmacy, for government, for financial industries, where, for instance, data privacy was a big thing, and reaching compliance throughout. Where we found that actually the key to success is flexibility. So every platform has its quirks, and you need to understand them very well, but also need to be able to deal with them. And when we deal with requirements, that also goes for the migration of content itself, or the applications that run on top of it, etc. And you have to make sure that the requirements for the target environment are met. And that also means sometimes making tough decisions on what features are we losing and how can they be compensated for. And that means also that the analysis of those requirements, but also of the capabilities of the target platform against those of the current situation, are key before you even consider to make the actual move. And that's why we stress the analysis is very, very critical to making that decision. And we offer basically a lot of tooling and services to make that happen. For us also, we felt and seen in all those years that actually you as a customer, or maybe I'm talking to potential partners or actual partners now, you would have seen that you don't deal daily with these kind of transformations. So you don't know where to begin, you don't know where to end, and in the middle is a big blob. So we tend to choose for the white glove treatment. We try to get most of the risks and worries away from you, basically giving the experience. And there's a lot of parties in the market that can do that for you, but you should really ask for that, because if you try to really dig into this yourself and deal with all the aspects of it, it's going to be a nightmare. Only when dealing with it on a daily basis for more than 18 years, you're able to feel comfortable with that. I can guarantee you. And we see, and especially the last 5 years, a lot of demand for, but also very good results from migrating legacy ECM platforms, the big ones you see in the Gartner report, to the Microsoft platform. And I'm in all honesty, in 5 years back, I would not be able to tell that, because the platform at that stage, with the very pristine cloud architecture of Microsoft Azure and Microsoft 365, was not fit to migrate all the use cases from a legacy platform towards the Microsoft one, simply because a lot of the features were lacking, especially the user experience, etc., was a lot less. Essentially, you were looking at a lot of siloed applications ranging from SharePoint, Exchange, then OneDrive came, finally Teams, etc., and now also the Power Platform and the Viva platform. But moving gradually into a much more integrated situation, and now it's basically one big platform for content services with a lot of applications on top, which is basically the desired state of any ECM platform nowadays. Forthcoming is an article, a special article on content, the state of content services in the market. So very much addressing this topic. It's under review currently, but you follow the LinkedIn for Xillio, you will see it emerge in the coming weeks. And finally, including regulatory, industry, and government, this was always the toughest use case to deal with because of all the rules and regulations, which also differed a bit per industry. We've seen a lot of those use cases. So far, we have not shied away from any, and we've always been successful in that You just have to turn your attention to specific aspects and deal with that, and also provide functionality to deal with that. So in all righteousness, I can say no job has proven to be too hard in this area. And yeah, the testimonials actually certify that it can be done, and many of them you can address if you're still hesitant and say, hey, can this be done in our situation? There's similar use cases we can dig up, which you can check and see what kind of challenges were there and how they were solved. So also from experience, we can underwrite this position that it is actually possible to move nowadays. Any questions there?
Rob, I've got a few questions on the previous slide, right? We're talking about 18 years experience and being able to deal with what APIs are available from these legacy ECM systems, the documentums,
Sure.
the alfrescos, the live links, the file nets, the hummingbirds, and naturally, traditionally, when we spoke to 5 years ago, let's talk 5 years ago, a lot of these ecosystems were closed from Microsoft side as well as partner ecosystems, and it's really about the understanding and the translation of, hey, this is a document sitting in a folder in an enterprise workspace in LiveLink, and we can interact with that object, grab all the metadata surrounding that object, and then moving it to a destination system like either SharePoint Online or like you've done with Mott MacDonald, actually using some, and I love the unified data model, because you really build the rules engine there that says, okay, if this document is, for example, older than 7 years, I'm actually going to put it in legacy storage inside of Azure Files instead of moving it to current storage inside of SharePoint. And I think it's that experience, right, that the likes of Cornet and Shirt and yourself, spending time with customers, being able to bleed for customers because you're working with that technology. And that's really where that white glove treatment comes in, where you're paying for someone that is an expert, that has done this repeatedly, and not just seeing it for the first time. And it's that glue.
It's true. And at the same time, the rule is don't go for shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. We have to deal with any requirement, any concern that is basically brought to the table. But the flexibility in the end is more important, I think. And like you said, yeah, there's APIs, but there's also a lot of situations where there's no API. So we have to basically support them all, and that requires a lot of flexibility in the software you're using. Originally, many years back, we actually used a third-party product for that, but found that the flexibility was lacking. Then decided to build our own, and still doing that, and actually currently completely renewing it on a more modern platform. So we ourselves are undergoing that transformation now to stay relevant. And I'm very excited about it. By the way, we'll have the internal launch this week still of the new product. And in a few weeks, months, maybe of more testing, the market will also see it. And we'll have another.
I'm very excited about that.
Yeah,
I've had a sneak preview. Rob's taken
a landslide difference to the way we're currently working. So interesting enough. Okay. Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Right. Anyone from the audience?
No, they're very quiet. It's
very
a tough crowd today.
They're baffled. Excellent. Second one, we need a compliance solution. So we must stay with the current one because it's fully compliant and signed off and green. And if we're moving to the new situation, we're not sure about that. Yeah, this is a tough one, because what is compliance all about? Well, the definition is, I'm not even sure where I got that, but I think from Wikipedia, as a business being in accordance with relevant government laws and industry or regulatory body requirements and standards. So there's government laws, industry regulations, and also maybe special for the relevant for the industry regulatory body requirements and standards. So that's a lot to take in, and especially a lot of enterprises, but not even the biggest ones. Also the mid-sized companies now have a compliance officer, maybe bolted onto their existing legal function as a task to make sure the company stays or becomes compliant and has no worries about their business operations. And there's different flavors, of course. You can start with human rights, right, which work for your HR policies, global trade compliance. There's business laws, very specific to specific businesses, all kinds of regulations. There's the Privacy Act, which is again generic. In Europe, we have the GDPR for the same. All kinds of data security standards nowadays, ISO 27001 being the most sought after one. And in compliance area, also records management basically deals with your information life cycle, a lot of standards there. And there's industry specific compliance. You pick your industry for financial, the SEC, the AFM. So for instance, we migrated the FCA, the body that actually regulates this for the UKI market, for the UK market, I must say. Food industry, healthcare, pharma, there's a lot of them, a lot more than this list. And actually, for instance, recently we finished that, migrating a pharmaceutical firm. They actually had the complete quality board as part of the project steering committee, and we had to make sure that all the aspects of the migration were documented and reported on in a compliant manner. Otherwise, they could risk their trade license. So it's not trivial. It's actually quite key that you got this right. And after the migration, equally so, maybe during the process, we can identify any sensitive data for you and make sure it's on your radar, and also advise you on how to deal with it in the target platform, especially if it's Microsoft, know all about that one, but also the likes of OpenText, especially the more modern solutions they have in their portfolio, will be able to support that. If we look at Microsoft, in the interest of time as well, but also our focus currently, there's a lot of new stuff. And maybe you want to talk about a bit, Alistair, because you have looked at the recent.
I can.
You want.
So the question is, are we going to be compliant if we move to a new platform, right? Because of, and I blame that the DoD standard from the late 90s, right? And the 5015.2 standard that was introduced, and because of National Archives, everyone believed that they needed to be compliant, and the large legacy ECM companies really took that and said, we're going to build our records management backend, and this is what we need to be compliant. And that was the standard for a really long time. Late 2016, 2017, we started seeing that standard sort of slip away because of the advent of things like the GDPR, which is regulative, not legislative, and then obviously industry vertical standards as well, HIPAA, FINRA, and all the other bits and pieces, ISO being quite a big one. And there's a new ISO 27001 standard now called colon 2022, and they introduced quite a lot of stuff around security and threat intelligence. And this is the new announcement from Microsoft. They've actually taken the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center and they've rebranded it, and you're going to start seeing this new branding coming through. Now, they introduced Microsoft Purview, which was a data classification and categorization platform hosted in Azure that looks at structured and unstructured content, and then it applies a sensitivity label flavor on top of that to say, hey, do I have sensitive information stored in structured content in an Azure database or in an AWS database or in a GCP content? So really what they've done with Azure Purview is brought all your siloed content, be it structured or unstructured data, into the fore, and they've actually represented it back. And as of today, Microsoft has rebranded the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center as Microsoft Purview. So when you look at all the features, those are the current naming conventions that you now have in the Compliance Center, it's now being changed to Microsoft Purview for everything. Now, we used to go to, and the next slide actually talks to Compliance Manager, which is really where we go to make sure that your Microsoft 365 investment is compliant, because what it actually does is it looks at the various standards. So it will take the data protection baseline from the UK, or it will take GDPR, or it will go into NIST or FINRA or FedRAMP or HIPAA, and it will actually look at all the controls that is stipulated in the set of legislative or regulative compliance that you need to subscribe to. And it shows you how to take what you have inside of your M365 tenant and make sure that you are in fact compliant to a specific legislative or regulative statutes that you subscribe to as the industry vertical that you are in. And we're very excited that Microsoft has now taken a unified view into data governance for structured and unstructured content and provided customers with all the necessary tooling in order to remain and obtain compliance for their cloud investment in both the Azure cloud and the M365 cloud.
Absolutely. And I think it's worth the while to spend a separate webinar on this topic alone.
Definitely.
Because it's so vast. What you actually see here is that there's a kind of an evolution now in compliance. So Microsoft, of course, acknowledged that compliance, including the information security and all of that other support for rules and regulations, became key to convincing customers that their data was safe in the cloud. So it goes way beyond individual applications in Microsoft 365. That's why Compliance Center was invented in the first place, to give you the one compliance center to rule them all perspective across all those applications and repositories. Then they realized, hey, but there's also this different realm, which is basically Microsoft 365 being the SaaS on top of the PaaS, on top of the IaaS. And basically you have the three layers to take care where data is being dealt with. And that means that you have to extend throughout the complete Azure platform, making sure that these risk and compliance features are available across those layers. And like Alistair said, they even take it beyond now, because you could even manage, well, at least in part currently, that will be extended later, I'm pretty sure, your hybrid landscape. And that's pretty exciting, because in digital history, that has never been possible before with any solution. So we're super excited about this perspective, but there will be a lot more to it in the coming months. To be continued. If we zoom in on Compliance Manager, so that's the Microsoft 365 perspective where your content lives, essentially, apart from all your other data that you manage through the Azure platform or even beyond. And essentially, it gives you the one-stop insight into your compliance status. Literally, you get a compliance score based on a lot of KPIs that they measure throughout your landscape. Essentially, you can mitigate whatever you did not achieve yet in various ways. You can sort of choose where you run most risk still and where you want to invest in that. To the left, you still see the old menu that's now being changed. You see now Priva, that was the latest edition, where they isolated the privacy risk because it differs per country and region, and you basically allows you to either go for that or not, or have a different solution for that. So they isolated it out, also license-wise. But with the new Purview platform, a lot of that will be bundled again. At the same time, probably the bundles are split up between individual licenses, so you can mix and match to complete your compliance landscape in the fashion that suits you best. Because we also have to acknowledge that maybe big enterprises need them all by default. Very small enterprises, small business needs less of it, etc., and everything in between. So they make it more flexible for you, at the same time bundling more and more in the same place and perspective, which is good, because control is all about being in a central position and overview everything, so you can define enterprise level actions on that. If we talk about sorry, I should have built it up as an animation, so it's a lot of boxes at the same time. If you look at the information and records life cycles, basically that's what information compliance is all about. It's actually two perspectives. So sometimes we tend to club them together, say, especially if you talk to legal representatives, records management is the focus. But as information professionals, we tend to start with the information life cycle of creating or receiving information, storing, classifying it, preparing it for processing. Then at the end, once processed, publish it, use it, and in the end, archive it. Then maybe still retrieve it, restore it, reuse, delete, whatever you want to do with it. But that doesn't mean you're managing records per se, because that's a subset always of this set of information that you use to run your business processes. So different features apply as well, and you can use this picture basically to map it to whatever AWS, Microsoft, etc. offers you in this respect, and to basically check on their completeness of vision. So for the information lifecycle, Microsoft, for instance, the auto-extract, auto-classify, they now have provisioned Microsoft syntax to deal with that kind of use case. I'm not allowed to say anything about storage tiering, but it will appear on the roadmap soon, I think. So that was one of the still missing enterprise features for content management, allowing you to move content to cheaper storage in time, especially if you have to preserve it for many, many, many years. And we know some cases of that. In automotive industry, you have to preserve technical records for 30 years. Of course, in the medical area, 40 years or longer, or even 100 years I've seen. I think the record I ever saw was 150 years for any document. And then the records management has a relationship with that, because as soon as you have published a piece of content, it can be considered or not as a record. So that means that you have to apply a predefined retention disposal rule to that category of documents, files, whatever content, to retain it or delete it, and also make sure that when it's up for deletion, that to check if there's a legal process running that affects that content where you still need it for a litigation case, for instance, and then apply a legal hold, basically blocking the deletion for a certain period until it's released again, and then the original rule will kick in again. So then you need to make sure that you can securely delete that information, and also have the ability to periodically audit the retention status to satisfy your audit bodies, depending a bit on the industry. So there is a loose relationship between those two cycles, but essentially they're different, and they also call for very different features. Another aspect, if we migrate, which is a special situation, we moving temporarily content from A to B, from your legacy platform to whatever destination, and more that's Microsoft. But after all, whatever the source and platform and targets are, we have to make sure, especially in compliant industries, but in general with government, healthcare, finance, insurance, pharmaceuticals, automotive, like I mentioned, there's a lot of them, that each step is recorded in a certain way, making sure that we can prove, for instance, that we moved all the intended content in the right way, so it's complete, it's not compromised. There's techniques for that, like hashing, etc., that we apply, and counting. And also that each transformation is documented. So if you're starting with data describing your content, basically, for instance, you're moving claims files as an insurance company and complete dossiers with a lot of different documents inside, and they all have a date stamp, but the date format in the target application is different. You have to basically transform that into another format. That's already a transformation you have to record and check that has been done properly and that dates have not been changed, for instance, or are wrongly interpreted in the target solution. All those aspects count and are sometimes very key. We often encounter data quality problems ranging from empty files or 0 bytes. And you'd still expect that complete the contract, and it has 0 bytes, so it's not readable anymore. At least we identify them and we discuss what to do with that. So in the analysis phase, a lot of these issues pop up, and you can individually select a strategic approach to deal with that. And finally, well, after all this transformation, we import, and of course we have to make sure the content that arrives is in the integrity is still guaranteed, and you can actually find that content in your new application. That's not unimportant. And only then you can sign off. Basically, also nowadays we will have, sometimes as part of the steering committee, but certainly as a sign-off step, have compliance security officers look at the result first before that can be done. Handing over to you, Alistair, if there's no more questions about compliance.
Thanks, Rob. And a lot of the times when we start talking to if the cloud is secure or not. We have a lot of conversations at a business level and also at a governance, risk, and compliance level around, hey, this data, data residency and data sovereignty, one thing, right? But we no longer have that bricks and mortar experience, right? Where this is our perimeter network and this is how we secure our content. It's now not sitting in a private cloud, it's sitting in public cloud. If you're moving to Azure or you're moving to, well, Microsoft Cloud or AWS or even Google Cloud Platform, right? Or a Huawei Cloud or an Alibaba Cloud. It's still no longer private cloud. It's not that a third-party organization is offering you, hey, infrastructure as a service where you literally renting racks in a server room where you deploy the operating system and all of those things. It's actually a public tenanted cloud. And a lot of the times when we're speaking to CISOs or data protection officers inside of organizations, the first question that comes up is that the cloud is not secure. Now, can you just move to the next slide, Rob?
I think you're a host now, so you should be able to do yourself. If not, I could.
Can I? Yes, I can see that. Hold on. It's your screen. There's a security tab.
Okay. You want to share yourself, maybe? Is that easier?
I can. Let me just grab the slide and stick it over there. Share my screen. Should be able to see this. Just gonna hit the present button.
Yes, sir.
You should be able to see that.
Yep.
All right. So let's just go back one slide. We two slides. Okay. So everyone can still see that slide, right?
Yep.
All right. So when we look at what most customers do when it comes to moving to the cloud, it's not just around where your content is, but also what telemetry data and what we call signals from your entire cloud security posture management. And when we look at what Microsoft actually does, and funnily enough, Microsoft is compliant in and or subscribes to more than 100 security certifications from various industry bodies across the world. And this is really what Microsoft deals with on a daily basis, right? And we've seen quite a lot of uptake in this. And funnily enough, there was I do a show called SEI Fridays, and we were talking to one of Microsoft's cloud solution architects, and they were talking about security posture management and how Microsoft actually runs their own security operations center for their content inside of their organization. And this is the telemetry data that they are actually dealing with every single day. They manage all the threats that are coming in. There's a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning built into the back end when it comes to being able to deal with threat intelligence inside of the organization and defense in depth. Now, naturally, when we look at where customers are today and where they want to move to tomorrow, it's not only about their legacy ECM system that they want to protect, but they want to protect all their digital assets being stored in structured content in databases, as well as unstructured content in the form of Word documents or PowerPoint presentations or Excel spreadsheets. Now, we know that Microsoft has a great approach to security inside of the cloud, and naturally, when you look at methodologies and implementation frameworks like the CIS benchmark for Office 360 or Microsoft 365, naturally, we would want to approach it from a zero trust perspective. It's all the rage currently inside of organizations. And it's three simple principles: signal, decision, and then enforce, right? So how do you measure and mitigate and understand where that signal is coming from? All that information that you're getting inside of your organization before they actually touch your perimeter, right? So if you're sitting at a coffee shop on the beachfront in Venice Beach, right, in California, what does that mean to your organization? Or are you sitting inside of your building and your perimeter network is more secure? So what do we do with that signal, right? And now remember, we're saying, well, in gone are the days where your content is only sitting inside of that legacy ECM system in your building, right? There's a lot more to content services than just that. And what Microsoft has done really well is unified that approach to security posture management inside of your organization. We've got one content store called SharePoint, and content's going to sit in that. But we apply a unified approach to risk mitigation when it comes to zero trust. And they've got a plethora of products available to you at no extra cost, because chances are you're already consuming these services in some way, shape, or form. It's just extended to your content management system, in this case being a combination of using Teams as a front end or using SharePoint as the back end, as your content delivery network for Teams, and then also platforms like OneDrive, Stream, Planner, and To Do, and all the other bits and pieces that make that up. So, I mean, if you look at just this specific slide talking to the Microsoft cybersecurity reference architecture, utilizing zero trust principles, it is, I mean, even the slide is scary, right? Because there's so many things.
Well, at least Alistair, Purview will take more of this space from now on.
Well, as of 2 days ago, the slide was still current, right? And that's cloud, right? If you look at information protection, there's one component there around information protection, and it talks about Azure Purview, but that entire block is now changing, where you're actually going to be using Purview equals compliance, Microsoft Defender equals security, and Microsoft Priva equals privacy management, right? Yeah. And it's, you know, I used to, and it depends on where you are in the world, right? When I talk about Jacques Kallis, he's the world's best all-rounder for cricket. This is exactly where Microsoft is. They're the world's best all-rounder when it comes to security and compliance solutions for your content inside of Microsoft 365. And it's amazing the tooling that is available to you today, all integrated into one single pane of glass when it comes to managing your cloud security posture for services that you do consume. And there's a plethora of technologies available, and chances are you're already licensed for it if you're on an M365 SKU, be it E1, E3, or E5. There is a subset of this that is available to you. If you're looking for privileged access management, or you're looking for role-based access control, and also what you can do with the technologies when you are risk profiling your user from the device that they are accessing your information from, and also where they're accessing your information from. And you can make on-the-fly decisions based on risk profiling your user from where they are coming in from, and then providing them with the necessary services based on risk mitigation in that regard.
And I can talk from experience when there was a period when I built a SaaS service from scratch. And believe it or not, but the security measures we had to take on top of the actual solution, the application, the cost of that was for top of mind. Well, let's say 60% of the total solution was covered by security cost and compliance cost. So it's not trivial, for sure.
And I always reference, well, hey, you need to do something. Okay, click a button, can make some coffee, and by the time you come back, that service is provisioned for you, right? And I think what Microsoft has done really well over the last couple of years is making it easy for customers to consume technology so that they reduce their time to value, right? It doesn't take 3, 4, 5 months to build something. It's literally, it's pre-built, pre-packaged, click a button, and away you go. And I think what I really enjoy and what I'm looking forward to with the new Xillio migration platform is that a lot of those teachings and learnings that you have had experience with customers is now built into the new version of your migration platform. And I'm very excited about those playbooks and runbooks that you're building, so that you can provide even a shorter time to value for customers that are wanting to migrate off their legacy ECM system into either SharePoint Online or a combination of the Microsoft 365 services. So from a security perspective, security operations, from SIEM, SOAR, XDR, all those cool terms that the security kids are talking about today, you get to consume that as part of your enterprise content management platform inside of Microsoft 365. And it's definitely more secure than, you cannot replicate this in your on-prem or even a third-party legacy ECM provider that's saying, hey, we have cloud-based services. It's impossible. Trust me, it is impossible. Moving on to point number 4, it's too difficult to build that information architecture. Now, what we've seen over the years is that, I mean, I'm busy with a live link to SharePoint Online project currently, right? And I love live link. Like it's still very dear to me. They built the Ferrari of ECM platforms, right? They literally have. But like you said earlier on, Rob, nobody drives it like a Ferrari. No. I've got a customer currently that actually has driven LiveLink like a Ferrari, right? We typically drive it like a Toyota, right? We drop the kids off at school. We might go away for weekends with it, but no one's flooring it. No one is taking it to, you know, we're not taking it around a racetrack or going off-road, even if it is an MPV, right? And for the most part, these legacy ECM systems have been used, one, for document and records management. That's the big thing, right? Process management, yes, I'm still very much in love with LiveLink Forms and LiveLink Workflow because of ease of use. Like the LiveLink Workflow engine's got 5 steps, right? That's it. Yeah. It's got 5 actions, and that's what you do. But because of their depth, it can become infinitely complex. And building out your information architecture, it's really come down to 3 things, right? Teams as your front end. So you're going to be using Teams as your front end, and then you're debating folders versus metadata. And what you need to do is you should look at what's available to you when you are actually building out your information architecture when it comes to document and records management and what is available to you. Because, and funnily enough, I remember when Microsoft first started talking about enterprise content management, they actually wrote a white paper back in 2006, and they abstracted everything, whereas your legacy ECM systems roll up everything. Like LiveLink talks about enterprise information management, whereas Microsoft is used to silo that. BPM is outside of enterprise content management. Yeah. And I never understood it until now, because it makes complete sense when you actually look at how they structure the tooling that is made available to organizations. Collaboration and communication teams, right? You've got chat and you can do meetings, right? And in this case, we're using Zoom for quite a lot of things. But when you look at modernizing your information architecture strategy, Microsoft's not only provided you with the likes of SharePoint, which has been around for 21 years now, so it's not new anymore, but they've also moved on to platforms like SharePoint Syntex and Project Cortex. Yes, in that order, Project Cortex and SharePoint Syntex, where they are actually providing you with a platform where you can actually use machine learning and artificial intelligence to classify and categorize your content from a document understanding perspective. So typically, when we look at large organizations, when we look at the models that we can build and train inside of SharePoint Syntex so that you can surface it through the Viva platform, right? When we start looking at what's available, typically we have quite a lengthy, quite a concise classifications and categorization tree inside of a product like LiveLink, right? With the advent of SharePoint Syntex, we are saying, hey, we've got a body of knowledge, 100,000 documents in there, and we literally drop it into I call it a staging area, where we can actually sort of interrogate the document and start identifying it based on compound terms. Like on the screen currently, you're looking at a model that says, hey, we want to identify documents of a contract type, right? And we want to identify contracts. So how do we go about looking up the usage of verbs, not verbs, words inside of that could relate to a contract? So chances are, if there's the word contract in a document, it's a contract, right? But we also look at all the other bits and pieces that would necessarily give us that. So we apply a model based on extracting entities from that document. And then based on a confidence ratio, we then say, hey, if this walks like a duck, talks like a duck, looks like a duck, it is a duck. And that is available to you, especially when it comes to the amount of content that is provided to you, or the amount of content you have stored in your legacy ECM system. And we're talking about big data, not just, hey, small data. I mean, how robust is the environment? I've got not a customer, a good friend of mine. They've got I call it a revolving credit plan with Microsoft, where they got a data trolley coming in that allows you to copy 200 terabytes at a time into an external store, and they ship it into the Microsoft data center, and then it's attached to your tenant, and then you can decide what you want to do with it. Because that's what it's. And it's not that I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm excited about saying this, is that SharePoint in the cloud is enterprise grade, right? It's enterprise ready, and you can do so much more than your legacy ECM system just by looking at what they are doing, what Microsoft is investing in when it comes to machine learning, and being able to build out your AI DM, right? I suppose that's what we're going to start calling it, the artificial intelligence document management system, right? Because, and we used to do this in the old days with search, right? When it came to compound term processing and weighting, it's the same thing, right? There was a brilliant search product, not the one that Microsoft bought. I think they're still around, called concept searching. Well, Microsoft bought Fast, right? And we're seeing some of that.
Of course, that was the market leader by the time. And you're referring to the idle engine, I guess.
Yeah. And when it came, so, you know, compound term processing was a thing, right? So that's either one word, and I mean, Google's done quite a bit when it comes to the words when you're searching for a compound term, and hitless relevancy and weighting, and Microsoft's provided that same level of intelligence when it comes to identifying, classifying, and categorizing content. So they've taken off that heavy classification and categorization schema that you used to build in your legacy ECM system. They've taken that away from you, where you don't have to worry too much about that. Just build the AI model and let AI help you. Naturally, that's also been surfaced.
Maybe one more aspect on that. So we're talking syntax, right? So what is interesting to know is that that's confirmed. I actually would point everybody to the Microsoft roadmap. It gives away a lot of interesting information about what's to come. If you look at the syntax one, filter for syntax, actually you will see that this is the place to go for the real enterprise ECM features moving forward. So I think the reason is that they don't want to step into the same pitfall as many of the ECM platforms have done by bolting on all kinds of features in the standard interface, making it almost impossible to still manage, and definitely hurting the user experience, especially for the ones that have to deal with the information themselves, not the people governing it per se. Actually keeping the likes of SharePoint as simple as possible, putting it even behind Teams, you know, to focus more on the collaboration experience, and doing the information processing in a separate module, which is now syntax. That's the best way to summarize it, I think. So there will be an enormous list of extra features in the near future. Already we have the model training on forms, you know, you can do forms recognition, you can do content recognition in this way, special pre-trained models for invoices, resume, contract recognition already there, being expanded, no doubt. Have a look at the roadmap. There's a lot of new features coming already there, which are quite exciting to know about if you consider a move from your enterprise content management legacy towards this platform.
Yeah, and I think Microsoft has spent, I think it was 2017 when everyone got together and said that ECM is no longer a discipline that we want to talk about. I think I wrote an article about the death of ECM, you know, long live content services. And it's really about being able to automate content or document understanding and content processing, right? And we've seen quite a few features coming through syntax now. And when we look at the roadmap, where it is actually going to, that I'm quite excited about. And naturally, how we go about surfacing this, and this is just one of the cool things, how you can actually surface document understanding and topics coming through when you start looking at what topics is actually doing, and the entire Viva stack of products that Microsoft is driving through their, you know, their single pane of glass, which is Microsoft Teams. You know, so have a look at what they're doing around data visualization. I mean, we're starting to see that come through Viva Topics and a few other things, and SharePoint syntax and document understanding, and it's very exciting to see what that does. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is when moving customers off a legacy ECM system that they've been using for 10, 15 years, right? Because that's typically the lifespan of, if not more, and I'm trying to be conservative because I'm old, you know, customers have been using legacy ECM systems since before the term ECM came about, right? Everyone was talking about EDRMS, document and records management. That's where it started. And then they added web content management and digital asset management and everything that ended in the word management, they added it to make up ECM, right? And moving customers off a platform that people have been used to working with for 10 years, it's not that easy, right? It's literally not that easy because everyone says, well, hey, we have to train thousands of people to use the new platform. But if you look at what COVID's done over the last 2 years, everyone had to move to a hybrid, or well, not even hybrid, you are working from home and there has to be an interface. And it's sort of counted in Microsoft's favor, right? That COVID happened and everyone had to work from home, and naturally everyone started working with Teams. And when you look at Microsoft's strategy, and actually I remember Satya saying, I think it was 3 months into COVID, and he said, we've achieved 2 years of digital transformation in 3 months, right? That's what he said. And how did people adopt the technology? And what's nice about when we start looking at, well, hey, well, you need to start looking at what adoption and change management looks like, and it's going to cost a ton of money, and we need to move on to training and development and the skills required to adopt the technology. Well, the thing is, you're already using the platform, right? You're already there. You're using Teams, right? And SharePoint is the backend for. Someone actually said today, SharePoint is the backend for Teams, right? SharePoint is the content delivery network for Teams. So your users are already used to working inside of Teams. They know what the files tab is. Chances are they don't know that it's SharePoint. But when migrating from a legacy ECM system into Microsoft 365, it's going to sit in SharePoint.
And remember, Alistair, so in the beginning when you worked with Teams, you know, you were not working in the same version you're working with now. It was kind of evolving on the fly while you were working. So you were driving the car and they were still bolting on all kinds of bits and pieces to make the user experience better and more powerful for you. And remember up front, when a lot of CIO says, I'm never going to move to the cloud because I lose control. My end users will be exposed to all kinds of new features, and I have no say in it. Now, has that ever been a problem for us now? No. People, there will be frontrunners saying, hey, I just tested this new feature, it's great, or it's not working, whatever. They will inform their coworkers about it and kind of do that in a very organic way. So I've never seen that as a problem. At first, I thought it was going to be a big issue. But in practice, I must say, I'm rather looking forward to the next feature than still debate on the current ones. I'm not sure how
that's
it's
the
with
thing,
you.
right? We look at organizations adopting something like Teams, and this is just sort of Teams plus document management or Teams plus records management, because it's all available through the interface. And what's not available through the interface is a link into SharePoint. And that's really the exciting part, right? When we look at what we actually need to do when it comes to adopting a new technology. One, we've already got exposure. And two, it's really about an extension of what you're already consuming. So naturally, when we look at how to get through this, we need to assess what your information architecture looks like. We do an as-is to-be mapping. Are you going to front it with Teams, or are you going to front it with SharePoint? A lot of organizations tend to want to either do a combination of both, or a hybrid, or they just want to front it with Teams. And that's really, and something you said earlier on, Rob, where you get to make that decision. The platform is already available for you. And literally, it's as simple as moving content, copying content from one area to another. So make sure that you plan and map. And I like the mapping tools that's available to you from Xillio, the unified data model. And it's exhaustive, because that's what you said, right? And in the original slides, flexibility, you know, is the standard. And I like that, because and working with a customer currently on a live link migration, the flexibility of the data that you can retrieve through the insights product, as well as how that feeds into the unified data model, so that you can build out this map for when migrating. And you've got so many choices when building out this map to actually move stuff. And in the interim, while you're building out this map, you can start getting your users used to the new experience. And this is just an extension of what you're already using. And then you perform your migration, right? And it's 5 simple steps: assess, plan, map, train, migrate. And then obviously at the end, you're going to start consuming, or you're already consuming a service. This is just an extension. But make sure that you actually go through these processes, right? As much as we want to make it easy for you to perform the migration, planning, I cannot emphasize enough that make sure that your information architecture planning and mapping, something as simple as, hey, you're going from LiveLink to SharePoint Online. And in LiveLink, you had your enterprise workspace, and all you did was folders, right? So you end up with a folder depth of about 20 folders, and then file name at the end of that. And you're going to be limited at 256 characters or 400 Unicode characters, right? And that's what your limitation is going to be when you get to SharePoint. So make sure you understand what the limitations are when moving to SharePoint from a file path, what relative links are, and what you can and cannot do. And then, based on that understanding, you are able to map it accordingly and then run the migration. The actual migration, when it comes to clicking a button, is the easy part. It's all the planning up front that you really need to go through. So from my side, final thoughts. And I think I've already covered that. Plan some more. Understand what Rob said earlier on about understand what feature sets are available. That's very important right up front before deciding to move. Understand what you are not necessarily going to lose, but what you're going to need to transform from your existing legacy ECM platform to this new platform, and then take it from there. Rob, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, maybe one important aspect that if you look at that process, it doesn't necessarily, or most cases actually, it's not a big bang per se, you know. You do the analysis, etc. It's not a waterfall kind of approach anymore. Most of our projects are really done in an iterative fashion, and you can expect that from any transformation now. So typically you could, of course, determine your central strategy, and you do your choice of platform. Obviously, you don't do that per business unit, let alone department. And so that's the enterprise aspect of it. But when you get to the actual migration, you will see a lot of iterations, typically per business unit or even per department, where they have slightly different scopes, different transformations needed, etc. Variations on the information model. And that's basically what happens in practice. And another aspect, we've been talking a lot about Microsoft, because basically it's now making up more than 60% of all the migrations we do. We didn't think of that, but it makes sense. That's clear, hopefully, from this presentation as well. But the same principles apply to any, if you're considering to still upgrade your legacy environment, stay with the same vendor, go to the cloud, etc. The same principles apply. You should treat them as a new platform, basically, and seeing if they're still relevant for you in this new era, in all those important respects, including the security and compliance nowadays. That's my closing thoughts there. I saw a chat remark. Thank you, and you're welcome. And I'm going to send the recording to, yes, the recording is going to be shared. It's being put online on our website. Basically, the website also gets a new installment, but it's high time. Yachi, if you're listening, please hurry that up. And we'll be publishing that one, so you can basically replay it for months to come. Is there with our other assets. Maybe there's still some older recordings of especially the compliance and records management sessions that you can check out, and also our upcoming publications are shared there. So
awesome. Is that a wrap, Rob? Are we done?
For me, it's a wrap.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks everyone for.
Either we're giving back 15 minutes or we're still taking some questions.
Yeah. Feel free to come off mute if you have any questions. Nope.
That's fair.
All right.
So you can share the recording with colleagues as well that were not able to make it. That happens a lot, obviously. So that's the fun of having a recording in place. Of course, they are invited to share their thoughts and feedback as well. Spread the word. Thank you very much. And hopefully see you next time.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us. If you need to reach out to me, Rob, are you on Twitter?
Occasionally, but under a lot of handles, you know. I distrust some of these platforms.
If you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Twitter at Alistair Pugin. You can also find Xillio at Xillio, and we'd love to hear from you. I reach out, happily answer any of your questions you have, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you very much.
In my case, you can find my profile on LinkedIn. That's the platform I use most for business discussions. Awesome. Thanks a lot, everyone. Ciao, ciao. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Alistair.